young people have access to education and access to funds and resources more than ever. But at the same time, young people are taking less risks more than ever.
You start fantasizing about stability. You start fantasizing about just fitting yourself into an existing system rather than building something of your own.
There are two kind of sort of young people that I normally encounter. Those who want to do everything quickly, right? It's like a quick rich scheme. Sort of they want to do something that will quickly, turn their lives around and money would be flowing in and this. The other ones that are completely away from taking any risk.
It is never that an experiment will directly lead to success. It's your cumulative learning.
So we're living in a time where young people have access to education and access to funds and resources more than ever. But at the same time, young people are taking less risks more than ever. Hi, my name is Ahmed. I'm a consultant and entrepreneur based here in Dubai. And today I'm joined with a very special guest who's traveled a couple of thousands of miles to be in this studio with us. And he's going to be traveling more from here. But we've got a chance to hold him back. He's an entrepreneur. He's working in real estate. He's had his hands dirty on a number of things. But today we're going to talk to the young people and the young audience and see how we can resolve their challenges to take risks. Welcome, Fahad.
Thank you, Ahmed bhai. Thank you for having me. And I was really looking for, I think we've been coordinating for a very long time. And I was actually excited to sit down with you and have this discussion. When we first connected and we had a very brief conversation about how we look at things, how we look at entrepreneurship and how we look about the youth in our society. What excited me most was that there's so much overlap and so much similarity in the way that we see things. And I feel that another reason why I was really looking forward to this conversation is because I genuinely believe that once we sit down and get our thoughts across, something of value will definitely come out. And I think that will be really beneficial for all the youth across the globe, inshallah.
Correct, inshallah. And obviously you have been actively working with a number of young people. You've been mentoring them as well and you're running successful businesses. So I think you will probably add a lot more value. I'll probably have less to say, but we're here to pick your brains and hopefully the audience will get more value out of it.
We can do a voting from the audience as well, that who added more value.
Right. That'll be good. Okay, so first of all, I would like to know from you, what was success for you or what did you perceive as success while growing up?
Okay, that's a very difficult question. So in our household, normally when we are brought up with this vision that you have to be responsible, not just for yourselves, but for those others around you, right? And then that responsibility, because it's an overshadowing concept, right? And it's different for everybody. And then you have to be able to fulfill those shoes. Whatever that responsibility is, you have to fulfill it.
Right.
And normally what happens is that in our society and in our culture, people are usually pushed towards the easier outcomes, the outcomes that have lesser risk. And because those outcomes have lesser risk, then obviously they also involve a lot less experience. They involve a lot less exposure. And the whole learning around those choices is also gets very, very limited. So if you ask me, for example, like when I was growing up, right? So when I did my O-levels and A-levels and after that I went to uni, I probably think that getting a job and becoming an employee at a company was probably the biggest, I perceived it as a biggest success, right? That, okay, if I can get through this phase of uni and then I can apply to different companies and get employed at a good company and they can pay me like a good basic salary and then I just keep on continuing to work on that. So that'll be a very good start to my career and then I can just push it forward.
And I think that's what success has been like for a lot of people, including me. And once you finish uni, you need to hunt for jobs and you need to secure a good job. But I guess the risk is less. Obviously, you will find a job eventually, whether a good company or not so good company, but the reward is also less, right? So have you been conditioned while growing up that this was your goal, or was it just the standard society that was what they told you, okay, this is how it's going to be and that's what you perceived?
I think it comes from many different places, right? So it comes from your family as well. If you look growing up, the examples that your parents give you of success, okay, look what he has been able to achieve, look what he has been able to done. Most of them do not involve entrepreneurship at all. Most of the good examples that they give you are people who have probably, who've gotten into, let's say, who's gone into bureaucracy, gotten a stable government job, who's been able to get into a good corporate company and they've gotten a stable job and now that they have a stable income and they have a, like a work-life balance and they have a schedule that they follow. And usually people who are trying to become entrepreneurs. I don't remember my parents giving me any examples of such people. Okay, look, this is the person that you have to strive to become. And then when you go to uni, so I did my undergrad at a very good business school in Pakistan. And if you look at the way the courses are designed and the way the whole program is designed, they are just training you to become a good employee. Even the business schools, they just want you to become good employees so that you can fit into already existing corporate circles, and you do not feel the need. I think the training and the education is structured in such a way that you start fantasizing about stability. You start fantasizing about just fitting yourself into an existing system rather than building something of your own.
I think what you mentioned here is very critical. The word that is stability is because what happens a lot of time, the number of failures that they see in people going into business, that the complete business has been wiped out and people have to start all over again. I think that sort of scariness in going into that situation, people would obviously choose to be more stable, right? But what do you think should need to change for the youth in the education sector that will encourage them to take that risk and to change that perception and not just glorify success stories in entrepreneurship, but also glorify people who have failed and then come out of that failure?
Because failure is something that's looked upon so negatively. If you tell somebody about a situation in which you failed, there's so much shame and guilt attached with it that sometimes you probably, whatever your failures have been, you try to hide and mask those failures from people, and that's how generally the society works. I just a recent example of an online thing came to my mind. There's this cricketer who talked about this Pakistani team. It's always in the
Memes.
bad light, and he was talking about that it's either a win, Rizwan,
Yes.
that either you win or you learn, right? And if you look at it, it's actually like very sound advice.
Correct, yeah.
What he's saying makes absolute sense. He might not have said it in using the best of grammar, but what he's saying makes so much sense. Every time you fail, every time you try to embark on something new, every time you try to experiment with something, even if you're not successful entirely, but it can never be a complete failure. There'll definitely be some lessons that you take away from it. And then whenever you try to do something after that, you know now that you are not going to fail because of those failures, right? The feedback that you can give, because I think, so for example, let's say, I don't know if you've been working with kids and working with a lot of people, this is something that I've learned. It's very difficult to let people know, okay, I suffered from these things, and then you try to tell them to avoid those things, right? And they will just take your feedback very casually. They'll be like, okay, we'll see when we get there, right? But once you have experienced those setbacks yourself, then your brain does not allow you to take it casually, right? So I think sometimes you actually have to experience it. Go through that experience on your own for yourself to learn it and to internalize that lesson. And for that, experimentation is very important. So I personally feel that failure is actually something that we need to start promoting. It might sound very controversial, but it is something that because failure will only come once you're experimenting. And once you're experimenting, it can never be 100% success. When you're experimenting, there'll always be failures. But what you need to highlight from those failures are those points that you have learned during the process, and how you have come out of it now having learned something new, now having understood something in a better way. So yes, you might have failed on an endeavor entirely, like holistically, but the lessons that you've learned along the way, and when you continue to experiment, and every time all those lessons that you keep on learning, keep on picking up, when you consolidate all of those, that is what ultimately turns into success. It is never that an experiment will directly lead to success. It's your cumulative learning from all your experiments and all your failures that will ultimately lead to success. And that is something, because again, that is something that requires a lot of patience and a lot of endurance. Like you experiment something, you have to experience failure, but you still get back at it, and you continue to just keep at it, and then ultimately that consolidated learning will lead to success. But again, that requires a lot of patience.
True, and I think those who are implementing this sort of philosophy, they are eventually reaching some sort of success. But what I've seen is that there are two kind of sort of young people that I normally encounter. Those who want to do everything quickly, right? it's like a quick rich scheme. Sort of they want to do something that will quickly, turn their lives around and money would be flowing in. And this, the other ones that are completely away from taking any risk, they don't want to have the stigma of failure around them. Probably maybe it's different upbringing, or maybe it's sort of the era that we are growing up and how the world is evolving, and the whole capitalistic world that's moving forward. But what do you think? Have you encountered this kind of young people of these two different genres? I've seen them here in Dubai. I don't know about your experience.
Definitely. I think the first genre is way more common. And the sad part is that psyche or that mentality is not just amongst the youth. You will find that amongst seasoned professionals as well.
Right.
Everybody around us, if you try to see, I think unfortunately, maybe the society is just conditioned like that or structured like that. Everybody wants to make a quick buck. Like people, let's say people who are doing stable jobs. You'll hear so many stories. It will come up in the news that someone came to them with a get rich quick scheme, and they invested in that scheme, and ultimately they ended up losing all their capital. And it happens, and then it still continues to happen. It's like once you hear someone having suffered from that, you probably should learn your lesson and not go down that route, right? But no, people still have this, they have this fantasy that, okay, I'm going to put my money in this and then I'm going to get rich quickly. And so unfortunately, because that's something that you see in the society generally, like irrespective of what age group you belong to, and then the youth are very quick to pick up on those things. Why? Because I think the way this era of social media and this struggle that all these social media companies are, this fight that they have of grasping attention, what has that done is that people are becoming more and more impatient. Right? I was just reading the other day that now when they're making these TV shows and these movies, they're making them in such a way that the people who are watching them, they'll be watching it as a second screen. So they have one screen in their hand and it's the second screen, and they should be able to make sense of it while they are doing something on another screen.
Doom scrolling, basically.
Yes. So basically, when I was reading this thing, it was just mind-boggling for me that our attention spans have gotten so narrow, and that there is such a struggle for getting everybody's attention that people are getting impatient. And then that impatience also reflects in your career choices as well. Because obviously, you do not want to wait, you do not want to put in the effort, you do not want to put in the time that it requires to actually make something that is of some value or that speaks for itself or that's bigger than yourself. So yes, and for that is unfortunate that everybody around, especially the youth, they're always looking out for like those get rich quick schemes.
Very interesting you mentioned about the second screen concept and the impatience. Now, how I correlate it is the way we are operating our lives. Like, for example, if you and I were hungry right now and you'd say, Ahmed, I want to eat something, and I need to leave as well quickly. So here in Dubai, in 15-20 minutes, we can get some shawarmas and we can, we'll have our lunch.
It's actually crazy. What they're doing here, this delivery thing and this delivery scene in Dubai is just absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
I got to experience it firsthand. I was traveling with somebody and they used a cologne. I really liked that cologne and I asked him, what cologne is this? And he said that this is this brand from, and I bought it when I was in Dubai. I searched it up online. I sent that link to a friend of mine. Right? Order it for me, and whenever you're coming in or whenever I come into Dubai next time, I'll just pick it up from you, right? And then I just went in to take a shower. And when I came out, he sent me the picture of the parcel and that cologne had been delivered to his place. Like, I thought he was just kidding with me, right? And then, because I didn't know about this whole 15-minute delivery scene here.
Yes.
So yes, that is actually crazy.
I think the youth is now accustomed to being, to having everything delivered to them quickly. And so they probably want the success to be delivered quickly. And I don't think it's coming from the upbringing that they're having or from the society, but I think it's what's happening right now. And that whole sort of environment of social media attention span. And one thing that I want to also add is multitasking. And I want your perspective on this as well. A lot of young people I work with, they will do everything together at once. And they think they're good at it. And there's nothing you can do about it. And you have to let them be, right? Because if you try and interfere, it'll spoil everything, right? So have you encountered this? And what is your sort of opinion on this? Whether you should allow people to do multitasking or one task focus should be there?
I'm the wrong person to ask this question. I'm very biased in this because that's exactly what I'm doing all the time, right? Everyone is not capable of doing it. I think some people, their minds are structured in such a way that they're able to do the multitasking and be productive at what they're doing holistically, right? They're able to manage so many things together, and probably that is what makes them more productive. But there are certain people who really want to multitask, but when they go about multitasking, their efficiency really drops and the quality of work that they're producing also drops. So I think you have to be honest with yourself and do that self-evaluation that what category you fall into, and then probably you should decide whether you should be multitasking or not. Even if you are multitasking, I agree with you that there's certain tasks that require a lot of focus and attention, and if you do not give them that focus or attention, you will never be able to explore those ideas or concepts in depth, right? So a lot of times when we're trying to develop a new product, when we're trying to develop a new service, or we try to solve a particular problem, right? If your phone is constantly ringing, if you're checking your emails alongside thinking about that particular thing, you're never going to get a good idea. I've experienced that myself, right? So yes, there's certain mundane tasks perhaps that you can do, that you can get away with by multitasking. But I think generally speaking, when you require a lot of focus, or when it's time for you to do some specialized effort, it always makes sense to just shut everything down, put your phone on do not disturb, turn off your laptop, or at least do not have your inbox open in front of you, and then try to focus on what you are actually trying to focus on.
Actually, very recently, like just last week, I get a lot of requests and messages on LinkedIn. So 2 young people messaged me and reached out to me for some of my services, because I have a services page, and it was a copy paste message. So in one message I was some Dr. Silva, other message I was a Tony. So I called that out. I didn't, obviously I hid their identities, and I said, I don't mind being reached out, and I don't mind having a copy pasted message. I at least deserve that sort of respect that my name should be there, right? So I think that's what happens when you're multitasking. Probably, I'm assuming from the profile, they're young people. They must be doing a lot of other things on the side, and
I think another thing that we can attribute this is to their lack of general. They don't really care about things that much. For them, probably when you were relating that example, I was feeling that what you would have felt once you read it, right? You felt that disrespect, right? Because you felt that you would probably not do something like this to somebody, right? You would probably, whenever you were writing an email, you will make sure that there are no errors and you'll try to fix everything. The new generation, they probably think it's fine, it's just a typing error, or you can cover it up in other ways, and the other person will probably understand.
Change in attitudes.
So I think it's more of an attitude problem rather than a again, I'm biased towards multitasking. So yes, I would like to pick up on one of the things that you talk about, the upbringing and how that affects the whole scenario. And I think generally parents, that's what I've seen across. I've mentored kids in Canada, I've mentored kids in Pakistan, here in Dubai as well. And one common theme that I've noticed is that parents are generally protective of their children, right? So that's the common theme that you see, right? They are protective of their children, and what they don't want for their children is that they should not come in any harm's way. They do not want them to have any difficulties to face. They would want to smooth out the whole thing for them. That's exactly how they normally, a lot of parents most commonly bring up their children, right? And this idea of stability, this idea of not taking risks, that's basically ingrained in that style of upbringing as well, right? Obviously, when you're taking risks, when you're experimenting, there's going to be failure, there are going to be setbacks, there's going to be times when you're mentally down, when you are financially down, when you're and nothing is making sense, right? And because obviously it's not a very good position to be in, but if you really want to grow, if you really want to create something, or you want to become something, this is the path that you have to take. There's no shortcuts to it, right? And I think parents do not want to see their kids go through that suffering, and perhaps that's why that they're trying to push them in a direction where they can achieve a certain sort of a life without going through all these difficult phases and without suffering at all. And what they don't realize is that the more suffering that they do, the more resilient they will come out to be. So this is something, and obviously because they are not prepared to see them go through that phase, they're never able to actually discover what a resilient kid would look like. And had they gone through that process, that okay, if my kid is taking risks, experimenting, failing, and keeping at it, and he's becoming more and more resilient, and at the end of the day, this is the outcome of all that process, they'll probably be pushing their kids towards experimenting and failure.
Right. I think that's what I experienced as well. At one point in time, my father also told me, you do your experiment, do whatever consultancy you want to get into as an entrepreneur, and then you should know that you can always leave that and get back to employment if you want a safe thing. So I think that push, that sort of cushion, if the parents can provide to their children, will obviously create more experimenters, more innovators, especially from our part of the world where we don't have any sort of innovation as such. And I think which is where I want your opinion. Do we have that sort of resources or community where, you know, parents can put their children out there and they know that this community will be able to raise my child into an entrepreneur after failing or learning from failing, and that cushion is there?
I think if you talk about on a like a massive level, on an institutional level, you'll find very few such institutions, and they're probably not in our part of the world. Probably in the subcontinent, you'll not find a lot of organizations or institutions that are actually doing that. I think one thing that I went to this workshop when I was in my university, and they talked about just increasing the number of experiences that you have, and I think that is one thing that can really help you understand what your qualities are, and that can also help you understand what you are good at. So one thing that I've noticed, it's not that rampant in the western side of the world, but in the subcontinent, while the kids are doing their undergraduate or they're completing their studies, they are not expected to earn anything. They're not expected to be financially independent. They're not expected to contribute financially. And what that does is that by the time they get done with their studies, they've had zero practical experiences. Even the internships that they do are very
Ceremonial.
Yes, and so what happens is that they end up with their studies without any real practical experience of life, of how businesses actually work, of how companies actually work, how it's going to be like in the real world, right? So I personally think that this idea of experimenting and pushing kids to experiment, and especially when they have no financial responsibility on them, because when you don't have any financial responsibility, you can go out, spend the whole day experimenting, and still come back home without having earned anything. That's the biggest privilege, because I think once you have passed a certain age in your life, once you have a family, once you have certain commitments and certain responsibilities, at that point probably experimenting is no longer an option for you. There comes a time in your life when you cannot come home and say, I cannot put food on the table today, right? So I think the best time is when they are engaged in their studies. That's the best time when parents should actually try to enable them and try to put them. We all have friends, we all have connections, we all have our own networking. Whatever networking that we have, we try to push them towards those different businesses, even philanthropic work that will help them understand that what the real world is like, what problems do people actually face. Once they've been through all those things, that then helps them understand that what is it that they are comfortable with, what is it that they are good at. Again, that is like, failure without any financial implications. So they might go do an internship and they completely fail at it, no worries, but they are able to figure out, okay, this is something that I'm not comfortable with. Okay, if you want to handle this kind of a person, this is exactly what you need to do. So all of these skills they will only pick up if you try to push them towards different experiments, be it sports, be it internships, be it charitable work, be it the work where you give back to society, anything like that. But we should try to increase the number of experiments that they make and number of different engagements that they have while they are studying, and that really helps develop their personalities and help them decide what they actually want to do when they embark upon their professional careers.
I think what you are talking about is probably a shift in how they used to be parenting in the previous days, probably like about 30-40 years ago, when the parents had decided, okay, one child's going to be a doctor, one's going to be this, and one's going to be an engineer, something like that. But what I think what needs to be done right now, that eventually there has to be business in the family, and for that you have to start early on, identify the strengths of the child, of what their interests are, and then get them involved in that particular sort of business or industry from at a very early age, whether they are being compensated financially or not, but they are learning the tricks of trade of that particular industry that has their own interest. So they will have that passion to work in that industry, right?
I think that transition that you're talking about, the parenting styles, I think the transition initially was from like a dictatorial position. Okay, you're going to be this, you're going to be this, you're going to be that, right? Now the transition is that do whatever you feel like doing without giving them an infrastructure, without giving them a pathway. And I think that pathway is missing. Yes, again, you let the kids decide what they want to do, but even once, if they have not had sufficient experiences, even they do not know what they are good at. Even they do not know what they are going to be comfortable with.
Yes.
with, right? The most important thing the parents can do, again, repeating myself, is that making sure that they can give as many different experiences, enriching experiences, and help their kids be engaged with different ideas and different activities so that they can actually learn what is best for them and what they are actually good at.
I think, yeah. So I think that is where we should, I think, do a venture on this. We're creating a pathway for young people after they've identified their sort of hobbies or interests, and create a pathway for them through our connections to get them those experiences, whereby after they've done that sort of experience journey and gathered real life experience of running a business, probably a failing business, and then come out of there and establish something of their own.
And I think we can use the platform to not only just offer like our own. So, for example, I've done this from my business. So there were a couple of kids who approached me and they wanted to come into the tourism sector, and they had certain questions. I did answer them those questions in the meeting that we had, but I told them, okay, why don't you come to our office, and you can have an internship where I can assign you a particular role, and then I can also give you one-on-one time to answer any questions and help you understand how this whole thing works, right? And I think I'm still in touch with them. They had a very, very productive internship because they were actually able to learn those problems and see firsthand how it is like to build and run a tourism business, right? I think it's a great idea, and as you progress in your entrepreneurship journey, the more entrepreneurs meet, the better your network gets, and then ultimately what happens is that whenever you talk about a particular need or a particular business, you already have someone in your network who's probably into it for a very long time, and that can be a very good source to connect people who are trying to experiment before actually trying to start something of their own.
I know in Dubai and in general in the UAE, we have a sort of community of entrepreneurs, of successful founders of startups who are ready to mentor young entrepreneurs. They have their own sort of communities, events. I don't know what's it like in Pakistan. Do the youth in Pakistan have access to those mentors easily, or there is a shortage, or there is unavailability?
I think that space is in the process of being developed. If you say that it exists as of today, I would not say so. But with different things coming up and people realizing that there's a gap in the market for this, so I think that space is rapidly developing now. And I think in the near future, we'll probably have some infrastructure at an institution level where this might actually be the guidance that the kids require or the youth requires will probably be given to them. And I think the government can play a huge role. But unfortunately, in our part of the world, policy making and all of those things are the last priority of the government. And I think with just basic policy making, a lot of good can be done in this space. And by creating, by encouraging entrepreneurs, by providing incentives to existing entrepreneurs, to give their time, to engage people, to have kids on board, and making sure. And so many times, some brilliant kids come up with some ideas, and if they're already working with you or working under you, you can help them show the path, and that path can actually be mutually beneficial for the businesses that were giving them that infrastructure in the first place. So I think, yes, something is happening, but for it to be actually beneficial or actually create an impact, it will take some time.
Now, let's talk about how social media is either a source of inspiration or a deterrence for young people to go out and achieve something other than just being a content creator.
Okay. Again, it might sound repetitive, but the problem is this, that in social media, the most important thing, I think, for any person, be it especially for the youth, is to understand where they are planning to take their inspiration from, right? Most of the people who have the highest following, most of the people who have those charismatic personalities, and who are able to portray their businesses as something very charmful, and all that they are teaching to kids, all that they are telling the audience is that you can get rich overnight. And being a consultant yourself, and me being involved in business, we can vouch for the fact that there is no such thing. Any success in business, especially in business, comes with a lot of time and effort, and that time and effort has to span over years, if not decades, for it to actually amount to something. And so because of that, what happens is that instead of becoming productive, right, whenever this belief is being constantly ingrained in the youth that, okay, whenever we want to get rich, we just need to follow one of these two people, and it's going to be a quick ride, and we can just get there whenever we want to, right? And what they do not realize is that it is inherently making them very lazy, and they are not ready for action. They think that whenever we want to do it, it's going to be very easy, just like this guy had his success.
Will follow his
Because
footsteps.
and so many people who are actually successful, even they do not show you the actual journey. You start seeing them after they have become successful, and then you only see those positive things that come with success. You do not see the negative things, and you do not see the journey of how they got to that success. So that just puts it in your mind that okay, this is probably something very easy, probably something achievable, and whenever I want to do it, I'll be able to do it. And that is making them very lazy per se.
I think going towards a closing note, what do you think should be a young person's mindset right now who's watching this and wants to embark on a journey of entrepreneurship, of taking risks, whether in entrepreneurship or not, but taking risks? What should they plan for now? Now, my next question is, what can we do as a society, as mentors, as entrepreneurs, as parents, for the younger generation who is probably afraid to fail and the stigma behind it? What can we do to make them move ahead and take those risks?
I think that if everyone needs to play a part. If we want to make a real difference, everyone needs to play a part. Wherever we think about someone opening a new business, someone embarking on their entrepreneurship journey, we should all be there to support them. Someone opens a restaurant, we should all go and try to eat at that restaurant. Someone is experimenting with a new product, even if you don't need that product, if you have the means, try to order from that person so that you create this general culture of encouraging entrepreneurs, right? And when I talked about promoting failures, right, it's not about like generally promoting the idea of failing. It's about understanding that if someone has failed, the society should be structured in such a way that they do not put that person down. They tell that person that, okay, you have failed, but this is what you've learned from this experience. And now you need to double down on this learning and then move forward. And once, if the society is structured in such a way and we are able to encourage, especially the youth, that, okay, if you're going to take a risk, we're all with you. If you fall back, you don't have to worry. You were just studying right now, for example, so you don't have to worry about the finances. You can do another experiment, right? But again, there's a very slippery slope here as well, right? Because, you know, when you're promoting failure and when you're trying to make them more productive, sometimes it can go in the other direction, obviously, especially with kids, right? They might just start because, you know, failure is only good when you realize that you have to keep at it, and you have to realize that the more work you put in, you will ultimately be able to get over all your failures.
The rate of failure goes down as you progress.
Massively goes down, right? But if the kids has this feeling, okay, no matter what I do, they're going to be continuing to promote me, they're going to continue to push me, then they have this idea in their mind, though, even if I fail, it doesn't make a difference, right? So this approach, so that's why I was saying that this is a risky approach.
There has to be a balance.
There has to be a balance. There need to be, if the failure is coming from all the hard work, all the effort, and because of other circumstances as well, and failure must not come from half-hearted efforts. As long as failure is not coming from half-hearted efforts, then I think the failure will only lead to positive outcomes, right? And again, if you continue to compound your efforts after that. And lastly, I think that the society needs to be structured around risk taking. Every good thing comes from risk taking. If I ask you just sit down for a minute and think about everything that you see around you, the cars, the watches, these cameras, these mics, even the iPhone that you carry, everything, you trace it back down and you'll see that every good thing that we have today came from someone taking a risk at some point in time, right? So this whole idea of taking risks needs to be promoted, massively promoted. Every good thing comes from risk taking, right? And if you look at data, if you try to analyze, all those people who take risks in a structured way end up financially stronger as well. It doesn't work the other way around. It's just in our mind. It's just this apprehension in our mind that we look upon risk so negatively. We've become so risk averse. That's how we have structured not just ourselves, our own choices, but the choices for our future generation and then the society in general. And I think if we can able to change that and we're able to allow the future generation to take risks in a sustainable manner, in a manner in which they can actually compound on their learnings, I think that's the way forward. That's the way forward to success. That's the way forward to innovation. And that's probably the way forward towards financial freedom.
Okay, and on a last question, completely off topic, but sort of an advice or a direction towards the younger generation or the people supporting the younger generation. What industries do you think they should focus on, given that AI is very popular, and especially in this part of the world, you know, environmental sustainability is also, you know, more called upon. So which industries do you think youth in this region, say in the wider Middle East, including Pakistan and the wider GCC? Which industries do you think they should focus on?
I think when we talk about AI, a lot of people are more focused on building, those models and getting the VCs together and just focusing on the basic models like, ChatGPT, Claude, and all of this.
LLMs.
Yes, I think more effort needs to be put on, building businesses around agents and building businesses that can provide services that can solve problems by you building AI agents. And I think there's a lot of room in that space. But my advice generally is not very industry specific. Why? Because the reason behind that is that there'll always be demand in some sector. When you talk about AI, you see so many people worried about AI, right? When you look at it, there are so many industries that have absolutely nothing to do with AI, right? AI is going to have no impact. There's so many things out there in the world that AI is not going to be able to impact, right?
Like, for example?
For example, right now, the construction industry, it might be able to obviously make it more efficient, make it better. But if you look at it from a holistic point of view, I think very far away from it being completely replaced by AI, right? So sometimes you just create these, apprehensions without...
So AI will basically just be a sort of another software in most industries.
It makes your work more efficient.
But not completely taking over.
But I think there will be certain industries that will be completely taken over at some point in time. And some industries might take a very long time to. That's just my opinion. But again, I think anything that you do, once you've learned your skill set, once you've understood what you're trying to do, and so there's one thing that one advice that I'm very biased with when it comes to the young generation. I tell most of the kids to do any sort of their first gig should revolve around sales. And the reason I tell them to do this is because, whatever business that you're building, let's say even if you're doing some sort of a tech development or anything, if you want to raise funds, you're going to have to sell somebody on that idea, right? So
Correct.
If you can acquire that skill set, which enables you to sell anything that you want to sell, be it a product, be it a service, be it a tech business, right? That gives you a huge unfair advantage when you go out in the market. Another thing that it does is that it enables you to develop some capital of your own, because normally sales jobs come with not just basic salary, but they also come with commissions, right? So that way you were able to, the more effort that you put in, the more time that you spend on those, you were able to build some capital for yourself. And once you're able to do that, that gives you some sort of support when you are starting off your own
less
entrepreneurship
reliance
journey.
on other.
Yes, when you're starting off your own. So that's where I'm very biased, that I usually try to tell them, because I feel every business revolve around sales. Right? If you can figure out the sales part, all the other pieces of the jigsaw just kind of come together themselves.
Correct. So I think that was a very, very productive discussion, but this is not the end of it. We'll have more of these sessions on similar and other topics as well. And thank you, Fahad. Thank you so much for coming in, flying in all the way from Pakistan. And I know you have a longer journey and you're a bit tired as well.
No, thank you so much for having me. And I think I would like to end on this note, that we would like to use this platform to let all the kids know that who have started their business journeys or who are in the process of starting their businesses, if they feel that there is something of benefit that we can add to their entrepreneurship journeys, we would be happy to help them out, and they can always reach out to us. And I think that's the approach. I think when I was building my business, there were so many people who helped me out in different stages, and I think if we can give back to these young entrepreneurs, that's probably another way in which we can bring about this whole entrepreneurship revolution that we were talking about.
Correct. So thank you, and I thank you all for watching. Hope it was a productive session, and as Fahad mentioned earlier, we'll do a vote who added more value to it, and I'm sure Fahad's gonna win this. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next one.